Hey there. I don't know why I started like that. Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beckosphere. Back here with the squeaky chair. But welcome. If you're new here, hi, my name is Becky, and every Tuesday and Thursday we talk about the climate here. The problems, yes. But the solutions, yes. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in, go ahead and click that subscribe button below, hit the like, comment, share, all that good stuff. And naturally, as soon as I start the live stream, that is when my cat decides that he needs to shit in the litter box. Yeah, so if you hear rummaging in the background, it's that little boy. But anywho, if you are new and you come here on the first event or whatever, then hi, my name is Becky, and you have come to the weekly Climate Book Club, where we talk about a climate-related book, as the name would suggest. If you hear a voice in the background, that is my mom, Sandy. Say hi, Sandy.
Hi.
And she is here so that I have another person to talk to besides you lovely people in the live stream potentially. Yes, so what we have been doing is we have been reading the book All We Can Save, Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. And we are on the third part of the book, which is called Reframe. So that is where we're going to take off. If you haven't heard of this book before, it is an amazing read. I highly recommend. It is a compilation of essays and poems by women in the climate movement. So very exciting. Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if you, have a place to put.
No, it's okay. I'm going to put kitty food down here.
That's a good idea. Okay, good. All right, so let us get right into it. Of course, Ruru's going to eat now, too. He's already pooped when I started the live stream, and now he's going to eat food. Love that. Are you going to go back to the litter box? Okay, great. All right, so let's start with the beautiful picture. Love it. All the pictures are by Madeline Jubilee Sato, which Jubilee is a really cool middle name, by the way. And it says, the problem of the climate crisis is the failure of language. The right word would be as long as the lives of my grandchildren and their grandchildren. Way cool. Very, very true. So the first one that is in this section is an essay by Katharine Hayhoe, who is one of the more well-known women of this book, I would say. She is very prominent in the climate movement. She is a climate scientist herself and communicator, and she also has an evangelical perspective, which is really interesting. So she kind of destroys the narrative that Christians, and more specifically evangelical people, don't believe in climate change, because she very much does. But yeah, so, and she is well known for being an amazing climate communicator. So it's very appropriate that she is the first to talk about reframing the narrative. So she first talks about how basically the climate narrative is to begin with, and how you learn about science and you learn about the specific things within science, and how she specifically got into it with her interest and her love of science. But she admitted, even as she was learning it, that it still seems like a far off problem. And it wasn't until she got further into it, until she started talking about it and realizing how poor the science communication is around the issue, and how people who talk about the issue are really like described as terrible things. Like she was accused of lying and peddling UN-derived satanic deception and a multitude of other sins when she was in front just talking about the data. It's just like, you can't win. I'm sure Fauci relates. And she's been called a loony, a fraud, a clown, all the good stuff you love to be called. But yeah, she says that 73% of people in the US agree that the planet is warming, according to a poll by Yale Climate Change Communication. And 62% of Americans recognize that the main reason of the warming is human activity, specifically burning fossil fuels, which is about 3/3 of the problem, and deforestation and agriculture, which is about the other quarter of the problem. So it's getting there. It's definitely the highest it's ever been for people to believe in the US that climate change is happening and that humans are causing it. Still not high enough of a percentage, honestly, but it's getting there. Is Rue insisting of eating up there?
I think so.
Mom's intruding on his eating spot. And she also says, which I think is really interesting. Oh, Shauna Burton, climate science needs good marketing. Ain't that the truth? Mm-hmm. Seriously, why don't we see advertisements for climate change like we did with like smoking and anti-tobacco? I've said that for a while now. They, like the smoking, the don't smoke people, they've had those campaigns for years and they've been relatively successful. Yeah. And we have not done the equivalent with climate change. I don't know why. Probably because climate scientists and activists have less money. I don't know, but I don't know. And because fossil fuel industries have a lot of money, but that's still the same way as tobacco. I mean, activists having less money and big companies having more money, but it still did something. Anyways. Hi, Shauna. Okay, so she also said 73% of us also believe climate change will affect future generations, but only 42% think that it will affect us in our lifetime. And that's a very big, important disparity because it is something that a lot of people think about. They're thinking, well, it's one of those issues out there. And it's just like, it's not the main priority though, because there's other things that are more imminent that we need to work on, right? Yeah. So then she goes and talks about how Hurricane Harvey hit, and almost 40% of the rain fell during Hurricane Harvey was attributed to human-induced warming. So it shows that it definitely is happening now. And the area burned by wildfires across western U.S. is more than doubled since the 1980s as a result of global warming. And bomb cyclones in the Midwest, which Texas saw that one recently, as well as a lot of other parts of the Midwest. And atmospheric rivers along the West Coast are intensifying as climate changes. I'm sure all you people reading this probably know the majority of this stuff. Well, maybe, I don't know. But bottom line is that we are becoming more and more able to attribute specific extreme weather events, one of those 1 in 100 year weather events, which are now happening way more often than they used to a warming planet. And she also said that since 1960s, it's estimated that climate change has widened the economic gap between the richest and poorest countries in the world by as much as 25%. Now, that was a staggering statistic I didn't know about.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that either.
I wasn't necessarily surprised. Like, it makes sense that countries that are not even on their feet yet are going to get knocked down easier by this. But boy, a quarter. That's just disturbing. And she says scientists can't expect to change the world from behind computer screens, no matter how many reports we publish each year or how long they are. So now she goes into, we need to communicate this better. And one of the ways that she suggests communicating it better is really just breaking it down based on what people care about. So it really is a focus on individual people or communities' real priorities. So for some people, that might be more economic based. For some, it might be more family based. For others, health. So everything that we care about as another issue, racial justice, education. Pretty much everything has connection to the climate change issue. And that was really her priority with talking about it. And she made an example of talking to this town in Texas, and she completely reconfigured her whole presentation to them just based on when she got there, seeing what their main criteria were for a compelling issue. And she was glad that she did, because it ended up really connecting to people a lot more than it would have otherwise. What else is in there? Anything else that I missed, Mom?
I think that's it. You begin with the other person's values and you show respect to them. And then you connect the dots of what they really care about and climate change.
Yeah. So you have to really personalize message, which is one of the reasons why I think it is really hard for us to have been marketing it, is because the difference between this and like tobacco, for example, to go back to that example, is tobacco, it impacts your health. That's the main thing. Like, there's other aspects like secondhand smoke, but that still goes back to the health aspect. With climate change, the health aspect is an issue, but there's also so many other ways that it impacts people. And some things people care about more than others. And when you go to different areas, those will be different things. And so it can be hard to create a global campaign around it with people needing to hear different things. So that's why we just have to say everything. That's why there's multiple advertisements out there, right?
Yeah.
Needs to be each different one. All right, somebody get on it. Okay, so the next piece is called She Told Me the Earth Loves Us by Anne Haven McDonald. And it is a poem, so I will read it to you after I drink beverage. And again, if you have anything to contribute to the conversation, please go ahead and put it in the live stream. That's what it's here for. That's why I'm here. So, yeah. Mona, shh. That's my roommate's dog. All right. So, she told me the earth loves us. She said it softly, without a need for conviction or romance. After everything, I asked, ashamed. That's not the kind of love she meant. She walked through a field of gray, beetle-born pines, snags branching like polished bone. I forget sometimes how trees look at me with the generosity of water. I forget all the other breath I'm breathing in. Today I learned that trees can't sleep with our lights on, that they knit a forest in their language, their feelings. This is not a metaphor. Like seeing a face across a crowd. We're learning all the old things newly shined and numbered. I'm always looking for a place to lie down and cry. Green, mossed, shaded, or rock quiet, empty. Somewhere to hush and start over. I put on my antlers in the sun. I walk through the dark gates of the trees. Grief waters my footsteps, leaving a trail that glistens. That one's heavy. And it took me a while to make sense of it, because it's a more complicated one. And I'm going to leave it with you guys, because that is kind of
something to meditate
on. You can play back if you want to hear it a couple more times. I think I read it out pretty decently, but also buy the book. Okay. So the next one is called Truth Be Told, and it's by Emily Atkins. And Emily Atkins, I was like, oh, I recognize that name. Why do I recognize that name? It's because she does a newsletter called Heated. It's a paid newsletter. That's one of the more well-known climate-based news sites out there, and she's really good. And actually, I subscribe to her. Like, I pay for her content and stuff, and it's one of the many newsletters I need to actually read more. But so this is her, and I want to interview her so bad after this article, because I was like, yes. From a journalist perspective, I was like, oh, she feels me. It's always nice to hear. So, yeah, she is talking about basically climate communication from a journalist perspective. And she starts by saying, by and large, mainstream journalism has failed to meet the challenges of the climate crisis. Point blank, which is true. And she also says, though, that journalism is essential to democracy, which is something that we talked about, or that I talked about in my last video. So if you haven't seen it already, go ahead and check it out. But it's basically like, you know, journalism, local news in particular, is so essential to the foundation of democracy, and yet it's dying. And it's also important for climate communication and to be able to personalize the message for communities. So, yeah. And her professors taught her that if voters weren't making smart decisions, that simply meant journalists weren't doing their jobs.
That's pretty heavy responsibility.
It's a pretty heavy responsibility. I don't know if I completely agree with that, because we've clearly seen that while good work is out there, people still choose to go to the stupider stuff sometimes. So it can be hard. Yeah. So I also like her mentor, Wayne Barrett, when he says, afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. And that's the role of a journalist. I love that. Any other parts from the first page?
Nope.
Okay. Second page of it. By the way, I'm on page 114 if anyone's following along. Okay. So she then talks about how her first assignment, and I just have to share this because it's just so funny. So she got a job at Think Progress, which is it was a news website. It's no longer around, but it was a news website by the think tank Center for American Progress. So it's a very liberal site. And her first assignment was about the prospective Texas Senate candidate who said global warming. This is just global warming was God's punishment for women who got abortions. That was his actual stance. And my faith of humanity has died a little. No. But the next sentence she said is, obviously, this was wrong, and this guy was a dangerous idiot.
Okay, she's not pulling any punches, is she?
No. But then she says, but I kept those thoughts to myself. And she goes further with the whole keeping her thoughts to herself idea throughout the whole section. She said, it turns out staying neutral isn't easy when you're not actually neutral, because the reality was I didn't want climate change to get worse, and I didn't want people to suffer. Every time I didn't say that, I felt like I was the one lying. And I relate to that so hard, because in journalism, you're just taught to be as non-biased as you can. And I think the public has a perception that good journalism is unbiased, but in reality, journalists are still humans, and humans are inherently biased. Even when you have an article that is completely just fact-based, which facts did you choose to use? You know, what sentence structure did you use? What paragraph structure did you use? Like, what sources did you choose to get it from? And why did you choose to even write the story? You know, all those decisions that are made, those are technically biased decisions. You know, those are what journalists at least think that the public would care about.
However, you are taught in journalism school to realize that those are decisions.
Yes.
And to try to be as independent and neutral as you possibly can.
Well, so that's the thing, is that we are confusing bias or being unbiased with being fair. And that's the difference, is that unbiased implies that there is no bias there. Fairness is recognizing that there's bias there, but choosing to give both sides equal time, being fair. Now, that being said, that's, of course, within the context of what is actually true. For example, journalists have screwed up for a long time of giving climate deniers and climate scientists equal time, even though that's not true. Fox News is fair and balanced. Ha! Shauna, your political leaning is showing. I'm kidding. Yeah. Anyways, don't even get me started on them. Trust me, I was so close to doing a whole video just bashing Fox News, but
moving on.
Moving on. Okay. You're going to get me in trouble. All right. So then she continues to talk about her experience, and oh my gosh, this story was a roller coaster. It was such a roller coaster because she was dealing with how she was feeling personally, and then she was like trying to like talk with with Wayne about it, her mentor, and he didn't respond, and it turns out later he died. It's just like that part was so sad. That killed me.
Very sad.
I was like, oh no. But she realized in relooking at his career that he would not have wanted her to be objective about it.
I highlighted the same
Of course,
sentence.
Same sentence, like we're related. Wayne wouldn't have been objective about this being the climate change conversation. He would have taken the bastards to task. Mm-hmm. I just love that. And the reason how she came to that conclusion is that Andrew Cuomo and Chuck Schumer both came to his funeral and were talking about how much they feared him, but they respected him. And she realized that if there was some shit going down, he would just outright call them out on their bullshit, you know? And that was something that she originally thought that she couldn't do because she thought as a journalist, she just needs to stay objective and not, you know, be as blunt, I guess, about certain things. And so afterwards, she went to work for the New Republic, and she had to write an article about Scott Pruitt, who is the now disgraced former head of the EPA. And she called him a hypocritical liar, and she was like, really like, is this okay to say? And her editor was like, yeah, the evidence supports calling him a hypocritical liar. So I think that's almost like where you just get to the point where you just, less words is almost better. Just simply be like, yeah, no, the evidence is pointing to you being an idiot, or you know, or them being corrupt. You know, at some point you just kind of got to outright say it, because that just really hits home to people more than all these bullet points. Like the bullet points, they should still be there, they're important, but what is the thesis of your statement? What is your hitting home point, the point that you want the reader to make sure that they get? And in the case of Pruitt, it was being a hypocritical liar, you know. In the case of that Texas congressman, he was a dangerous idiot, you know. So, yeah. And then eventually she went and started Heated. Now, what I thought was super interesting is something that I have struggled with for a long time. I don't know if you picked this up, but something that I struggled for the longest time when I was looking for jobs and stuff. I was trying to decide if it was better to, if it was more impactful to work for a news network that specialized in the topic of climate change, or if it was better to have it to be in a mainstream news network, a general news network, and work for the climate beat. What is more impactful? Because I got the impression that working for a company that was similar to what she has Heated would be preaching to the choir, because it would be specifically climate oriented, it would be climate advertised, and so everybody who went towards it did it purposely for getting climate information, and that would imply that they already were proponents of the movement, and so maybe they didn't really need to be the audience, you know? I assumed we should go for the deniers and the people that were oblivious to the issue in general. But what she said was really interesting. Rue alert with his little beady eyes. Yeah, hi. There you go. So she said that first of all, almost immediately she saw an impact with her Heated newsletter than she had ever done working at, I forgot to mention, she also worked for a Sinclair broadcast network, and those are notoriously conservative leaning. So she tried going for a liberal leaning place, and she went to a conservative leaning place, and then she went to a opinion leaning based place, and then she started a climate change specific publication. So she's really tried every single thing, right? Which is about the same journey I honestly would have gone on to if I was in her shoes. And so she said, though, that with Heated, almost immediately, I started to see the type of impact I had dreamed my words would make. In Heated's first month of operation, I named the companies that were advertising on the Michael Knowles show, which is hosted by a climate denier who called Greta Thunberg mentally ill. Following publication of that article, the ensuing backlash, really, Rue? Really? That's just rude. Hi, Enrique. He distracted me, not Enrique. Okay, so following the publication of that article, basically saying the Michael Knowles show is a climate denial show. Oh, Chuck! Hi, Chuck. Chuck Bingham.
Oh, fun.
Hi, Chuck. Oh, thank you. He says I'm proud of you.
Aw.
Yeah. Enrique. Hi, Kat. Yep, that's Rue. Okay, Rue, you are going to... He's knocking over my lamp. I need to open the door for him because he's about to cause havoc if I don't. Get out of there. Leave. Okay, bye. Hats, am I right? Hi, Chuck. Good to see you. My sister's... I'll catch up with you later, Chuck. Thank you. Okay, so a few weeks after she published that story, Heated, a few, geez, my brain just broke. Okay. Shortly after publishing the story, Vistaprint announced that they would not be advertising on any upcoming episodes of the Michael Knowles podcast, now or in the future. A few weeks later, Heated published an investigation into how Twitter's upcoming ad policy would benefit fossil fuel companies while harming climate advocacy groups. The piece sparked national conversation about Twitter's ad policy and climate change, in part thanks to being tweeted by Senator Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, that would help. And ultimately culminated in Twitter changing its ad policy. If that's not the change that we all are looking for, I don't know what is. Like, legit, that's goals right there. That's goals. But she also said that the readers said that they felt less alone just by her being there. And that one thing that she found is that for years, she assumed that educating people who already were interested in climate change would just be preaching to the choir. Literally, she uses the same kind of words I do. But in her reporting career has taught her that that's not true. She says most people who are interested in climate change just don't have the tools to talk about it confidently. The choir is here. They want to sing, but they don't know the words. And that just hit home. I was like, oh crap, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Like, dang. And I also liked her mentor's quote, Jack Newfield, who said, compassion without anger can become merely sentiment or pity. Knowledge without anger can stagnate into mere cynicism and apathy. Anger improves lucidity, persistence, audacity is not a word, audacity, and memory. And I thought that was also really interesting. And it just really does show the importance of emotion and tapping into emotion. Like, facts are one thing, but emotion really is what gets people moving.
Well, and scientists have had facts for years and years and years.
Yeah,
and
right.
The situation has not changed. So.
Exactly, which we'll get to later. Yep. And then they have a short little quote by Bell Hooks that says, the function of art is to do more than tell it like it is. It is to imagine what is possible. Beautiful.
And that goes right in with the whole
goes right into
reframe.
the next. Yeah, it goes right into the next one, which is called Harnessing Cultural Power by Favariana Rodriguez. And so she really advocates for the need for storytellers, which if any of y'all are storytellers, like seriously, someone needs to be writing a novel that's based in a more positive future, because right now that stuff is depressing. And we can do better. Let's imagine what a good future looks like, and we'll go into it more later with a different article that is called there are not suburbs in Wakanda. I think it's
in Wakanda.
Yeah, yes. In Wakanda. So we'll get more into that in a second.
That's a great article too.
I love that article. Really by the way, I highlighted all the women in the parts that I want to interview. Like I want to interview all of them, but I'm trying to narrow it down for myself. So like I've got coming some of them, and the Wakanda lady's one of them. Kendra, yeah, she's dope.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but first, Fabiana. So she talks about how important it is to have storytellers in the overall climate movement, and she says that we need storytellers, a mighty force, to help us shift our methodology and imagine a future where together we can thrive with nature. We must build what she calls cultural strategy for the climate movement. And our current relationship to Earth is based on a worldwide view of domination that supports extractive economy. What Greta Thunberg calls fairy tales of eternal economic growth, because you can't do it forever. And then she gave an example of also why it's important to have people of color and their voices. And one of the parts that I found really interesting coming from the Bay Area is that, so she grew up in East Oakland, and she lived next to the I-880 highway, which carries the highest volume of truck traffic in the San Francisco Bay Area, as it slices through communities of color, including the neighborhood she calls home. In contrast, the nearby I-580, which cuts through more affluent and white communities, did not allow trucks. And that's one of the most clearly blatant racist infrastructure examples I have ever heard. Like, that is just, yeah. So I just want to share that part. And she says what we heard earlier from an earlier person, which is, just as ecosystems need biodiversity to thrive, society needs cultural diversity to grow new possibilities. This is the second time someone has said that in this book, which is really interesting. I wonder if they knew that the other person wrote that or not. And then she talks about how in 2019, there were only 3 episodes of a TV show that talked about climate change at all. And she quotes Vice that says, a crisis that's reshaping every aspect of the human experience is being efficiently ignored by TV, which we've seen. And if you're watching the recorded version of this, I'm going to try to put a link to one of the more recent Our Changing Climate videos, which talks specifically about how TV shows have actually really hurt the climate conversation by doing the stupid, dumb arguments of, oh boy, climate change or global warming is great because it's nice and warm, or framing an environmentalist as a hippie and a hypocrite. So, yeah. But I love this one part where she basically compares stories to stars, which is really pretty. She says, the power of culture lies in the power of stories. Stories change and activate people, and people have the power to change norms, cultural practices, and systems. Stories are like individual stars. For thousands of years, humans used the stars to tell stories, to help make sense of their lives, to orient them on the planet. Stories work the same way. When many stars coalesce around similar themes, they form a narrative constellation that can disrupt business as usual. They reveal patterns and help illuminate that which was once obscured. The powerful shine in one story can inspire other stories. We need more transformational stories so that we can connect the dots and shift narratives. And I just loved that paragraph because yeah, it's a great metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
And so then she basically gives some points for harnessing the power of culture for climate impact. Point number 1, pass the mic to artists and culture makers of color.
Mm-hmm.
That's a theme. Imagine hip hop songs that say fuck the polluters, or indigenous storytellers being nominated on every Oscar slate. The first one, I don't know why that's not already a thing. Like, why can't we say fuck the polluters? And
because we're not using the F word, Becky.
Hip hop people do, and rappers.
No.
Okay. The second point she says is build diverse cultural infrastructure. And she founded the Center for Cultural Power to support culture makers as they engage more deeply with climate topics and other social justice issues, and to harness their immense power to shape our core narratives. So, yeah, basically just give more resources for makers to talk about the climate effectively.
Mm-hmm.
The third one, include artists and makers in your work. So she gave an example of a giant a set of murals that was created in the San Francisco financial district next to all the big banks during the global climate strikes, and how that was very impactful. And she says the urgency of the climate crisis demands that we develop strategies that embrace the enthusiasm of artists and nurture an abundance of cultural and narrative strategies to reimagine life on Earth.
Yay.
Yay. Next one. Is it fourth one? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, fourth one. Make human stories to move human beings. Good summary of that is, we must challenge the idea that some life matters more than other life. This means creating more stories that center the experience of human beings, showcase solutions, activate our human empathy, and help usher another worldview. Next one, create culture to challenge consumption. While we know we need a massive expansion of electrified public transportation to transition from fossil fuels, how many awesome movies do you see that center an individual car as a status symbol?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she also talks about like meat consumption and how ingrained it is in American culture to have meat on the table. Yeah. You know? Next one, let culture connect us to nature. Culture allows us to confront, acknowledge, and mourn what was lost while offering a way to move forward. And she talks about, which I hadn't heard about, but apparently during the protests of Standing Rock against the Dakota Access Pipeline, there was a story about the evil black snake and the heroic water protectors that were powerful as it united the native tribes and people in the movement. I hadn't heard of that story, but that's really cool. She says stories can decolonize our imaginations, which is cool terminology. Mm-hmm. Next one, stand in the power of yes. And that's basically, we use our radical imagination to visualize and manifest another world, and we can make that world feel real through cultural products such as TV shows, films, comic books, images, or songs. So it's really talking about, like, instead of just talking about what we stand together against, talking about what we stand together for.
Yeah.
And she says, and she quotes a Nigerian novelist, and I really like the quote. It says, until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. I just really liked that. Okay, that gets through the next one. Are you tired of my voice yet? Okay, So the next person that is quoted in this, just in the book in general, so it's not part of that article that essay's done. Next thing is leadership means there is enough room for all of us. Seeing everyone roll in together is much more powerful than having one or two people speak for everyone. Being generationally leaderful also generates the best ideas and solutions. We need to do this together, and we can do it lovingly. I love that. Enrique says, good point. We are here for clean energy. Yes, exactly. That's a good example. Clean energy. Yes. Sustainable agriculture. Yes. Intersectional environmentalism. Yes. Need to drink things.
Give credit to Elizabeth for that.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. The last thing that I read about Leaderful is by Elizabeth.
Yeah. Yampierre.
Okay. Next part is called Becoming a Climate Citizen by Kate Nuth. Starts with a K, but it's Nuth, probably.
Knut.
So she talks about a concept called climate citizenship, which she says that it asserts the chance of society gracefully navigating the climate crisis will take a renaissance of citizenship and civic life. Likewise, the scale and slope of the climate crisis means that it will reshape citizenship in fundamental ways. Yes. That's something that, again, it's powerful throughout the book that really shows that we need a very big transformation. It can't just be a small thing. And that's hard for a lot of people to hear.
Mm-hmm. But
yeah, it's kind of like, when was the last time we had such a big transformational change? Ever in human history, or in U.S. history?
I've got to believe it was like World War II.
Yeah.
Where so many people needed to engage to do something so huge.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the Great Recession needed so many people to engage as much as they, as we do today.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was how we got out of the Great Depression.
Yeah,
so this is
World War II was global too.
We're currently kind of in the environmental equivalency of the Great Depression.
Or World War II.
No, World War II is how they got out of it.
Well, okay, but I'm saying we have to fight like we're in World War II. We have to harness our resources.
Well, as she says, the early stages of transformation where we find ourselves today feels unsteady. They feel like an in-between mind of a teenager, neither a child nor adult. So, boom, that's kind of where it is. We are at the cusp of banding for World War II.
Yes.
That's where we are. Mm-hmm. But we're still in the depression phase because we're not acting enough.
Well, okay, so I'm going to interject with the next paragraph because I love this one. She talks about democratic decay, and Naomi Klein has articulated this problem of timing. As scientists in the 1980s started to document signs of the impending climate crisis, politics took a turn away from the collective and against regulation, while culture deepened into consumerism.
Yeah.
So it was like, as we're getting to know this stuff, things were shifting the wrong direction to make a difference.
Yeah, it really is a perfect storm.
That was just amazing.
Yeah. And what I thought was interesting is that people are now losing faith in democracy, which is not good. A recent study found that 30% of people born in 1980s believe it is essential to live in democracy versus 72% of people born in the 1930s. So only 30% of people born in the 1980s think that democracy is important. And I'm interested to know what about the people in the 1990s, born in the 1990s.
Well, okay, so in the 1930s, they had just gone through World War I, and they were
just beginning the Depression.
Right. But 10 years previous, they'd gone through World War I. So they had a lot of exposure to other ways of working.
That's true.
Other than democracy. But, that's an excuse. So have we. Right? I mean, Russia's not a democracy. China's not a democracy. We all know that anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, the 1920s were good for a lot of people. And so they probably contributed that to democracy.
So what she says down at the bottom of page 131
Mm-hmm.
The work of our time is to reweave the fabric of our democracy, even as the broken systems seem overwhelming, even as the work we can each do feels so small. It's time for an intentional practice of climate citizenship.
Which sounds like a lot. Some days I'm like, yeah, let's go for it. And other days I'm like, our democracy moves so slow.
Yeah.
And so at this point I was kind of skeptical because, I mean, to be honest, me
Mhm.
personally, like the word citizenship, it didn't really mean much to me. So
Mhm.
I appreciated that then she
Yes.
defined what citizenship meant for her. She said citizenship at its core is the sacred trust between the individual and collective. Only through the collective can an individual enjoy goods such as a healthy environment and certain kinds of support and security. At the same time, as a citizen, the individual has both the right and the responsibility to hold the collective accountable and to participate in it. In other words, citizenship is a dynamic process of constant and of consent and dissent of individuals as part of a larger whole.
Yay.
Yeah. Vote. But also holds people accountable and holds institutions accountable because they're impacting your citizenry, your community, and she talks about community vulnerability for like climate, which it's not really a term I've heard before, or climate vulnerability. That's not a hashtag yet. I think it should be climate vulnerability.
Mhm.
But it's similar to climate crisis or climate chaos, but climate vulnerability just shows that there's victims in this more.
Yeah.
And she says, as part of Earth's community, we are also called to responsibility in and for it. So not only are we a citizen for our human community, but we're also a citizen for the planet. And she says climate citizenship involves taking on the work of ensuring that mass human migration does not lead to mass human rights abuses. It means that we are planetary citizens in addition to being citizens of nations. I thought that part was really interesting that she specified on that part particularly, because climate change, and it's another video I should do on migration and climate change, human migration. That would be a good one.
Because I don't think that's been highlighted enough.
I don't think so either. Because here we are, like, being super, like, closing our borders and being against human migration. But climate change is going to continue to cause more mass human migration as places become uninhabitable in some areas due to the warming climate, rising sea levels. We're already seeing that within our country. Let's just think within our country. Wildfires come that are like 100-year wildfires come now every other summer, it seems. They knock down your house, they wipe it out. People decide, hey, there's no point building here because it's just going to get burnt down in 2 years. I have to move somewhere else.
I'm moving to Oregon.
And now Oregon's catching on fire.
That was tough.
That was really tough. So many people moved to Oregon from Santa Rosa.
Yeah, we
and
had relatives that did that.
Yeah.
To Bend. Yeah.
Relatives?
Yeah, Mark's family.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so like people, they ditch one area because they're like, this is too unstable now, and they go to another area. There you go. That is literally being a climate refugee. People aren't defined as that, but that's what it is. When Louisiana is losing square space and like square footage due to rising sea levels, that is migration.
When the people in Central America are pushing up against our border, wanting into our country, a lot of it is because their farms have collapsed.
Yeah, their agricultural systems can't handle the changing climate. So, Enrique, did you say that you know a channel who features that subject? If so, then please, like, send it my way, because I would be really interested to know what is being covered in that topic, because I don't hear that hardly at all, the connection between climate change and human migration and climate refugees. Like we talk about climate refugees as if it's a future problem, but we're already seeing it. And then there's also like more insecurity in different countries. Oh, it's your channel? Okay, I'm sorry. I need to look at your channel.
Everybody needs to look
everybody needs to look at Enrique's channel. PSA. I will look at yours after this. I'm so sorry. Yeah, because it's such an important issue. Well, maybe we need to collaborate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So, then she talks about how rare and fragile democracy is, and therefore it's really important that we need to keep it, keep it secure. And one part that disheartened me is apparently 10 million environmentalists did not vote in the 2016 election. What is up with that? That is just so stupid. I can't even. Anyways, it's exhilarating to see people find their unique contributions to this big collective effort, and it gives me courage to forge ahead amidst uncertainty. That was another part that I liked. And we're going to move on to the next one.
Well, and she ends by saying people just need to find their niche, right?
Yeah.
Of where they can contribute.
Yeah, which is what we said last week too in the previous one. So those are some common themes. One is that we need to give people of color a voice. Two is that we need to support creativity in the movement and to strengthen democracy. And we need people to find their niche and what they do best in that area, because everybody has a role to play.
Super good.
Yeah. All right. The next one is a poem, so I will read it to you. It's called Dead Stars, and it's by Ada Limon. And here we go. Out here, there's a bowing even the trees are doing. Winter's icy hand at the back of all of us. Black bark, slick yellow leaves, a kind of stillness that feels so mute it's almost in another year. I am a hearth of spiders these days, a nest of trying. We point out the stars that make Orion as we take out the trash, the rolling containers, a song of suburban thunder. It's almost romantic as we adjust the waxy blue recycling bins until you say, man, we should really learn some new constellations. And it's true. We keep forgetting about Antilia, Centaurus, Draco, Lacerda, Hydra, Lyra, Lynx. But mostly we're forgetting we're dead stars too. My mouth is full of dust, and I wish to reclaim the rising, to lean in the spotlight of streetlights with you, towards what's larger within us, towards how we were born. Look, we are not unspectacular things. We've come this far, survived this much. What will happen if we decided to survive more, to love harder? What if we stood up with our synapses and flesh and said no to the rising tides, stood for the many mute mouths of the sea, of the land? What would happen if we used our bodies to bargain for the safety of others, for Earth? If we declared a clean night, if we stopped being terrified, if we launched our demands into the sky and made ourselves so big people could point to us with the arrows they make in their minds, rolling their trash bins out after all this is over. I love that. One of my favorite ones is Rolling Containers, a song of suburban thunder. Because whenever you hear it, you're like, wait, is that thunder? No. That's someone taking out the trash. So that was very relatable. I really like that poem.
And you know what? I did not even relate the suburbs part of it to the next essay.
Wakanda doesn't have suburbs. I didn't either. Man, they did good. Yeah, it was a beautiful poem. I think that was one of my favorites, honestly.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah. And we are on to the last piece for the night, and it's called Wakanda Doesn't Have Suburbs.
By?
Oh, sorry, by Kendra Pierre Lewis. Yeah, so she really continues to talk about, she's clearly a film nerd.
Oh, big time.
A big dystopian science fiction nerd, which is beautiful. And she's also an environmentalist, which is a great combination. So she talks about basically how we have perceived our role in nature due to what film has told us and what media has told us and portrayed humans. She first said that one of her friends, scientist, author, and lecturer, wrote in her book Braiding Sweetgrass that she had a survey of roughly 200 of her third-year ecology students about basically the role of humans in nature, and almost every student said that they thought that humans and nature were a bad mix. Which honestly, I would have put it too. I would have said that too, absolutely, especially after going through ecology. But she was stunned because they couldn't think of any beneficial relationship between people and the environment. And Kendra really equates that to how we've perceived how humans have interacted with the environment. For example, she says there are societies that live within their ecological boundaries. The mountainous nation of Bhutan, for example, absorbs more carbon than it emits. We were talking about earlier how indigenous people in the land that they live on, generally they treat their land great, and the land absorbs more than they emit too. But we don't find these stories very much in US culture. And she makes examples of like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, Waterworld, Hunger Games, all pose it not only that humans could decimate the planet, but that they will. So all the ones talking about in future reference, every time we talk about the future, we talk about humans have already destroyed things. And we also see this in Solar Babies, which is a dystopian movie I have not heard of, but now I kind of want to check it out, I guess. And in Avatar, where people lived naturally with nature until humans showed and screwed it all up. That's a key message I got from that movie too. And then there was a short-lived TV show called Terra Nova, which the overly populated and overly polluted Earth started sending humans back in time to when the dinosaurs roamed to solve the overpopulation problem. Then there's the 100, popular TV show on CW. It talks about sending, adolescents back to the planet to see if it's livable again, and that's similar to WALL-E. WALL-E's a very big example as well, where it was so overpolluted, the planet was so overpolluted that everybody left in spaceships.
Yeah, but he found a little sprout at the very end.
And then that's where they came back and they started re-inhabiting the Earth and making up for it. So there was a good ending there after decimating the planet entirely. So I don't want to get to that part though. And then even in Star Trek, they found that the first key species, including whales, went extinct. And they talked about like how the world basically killed itself, So
such inspiring
stories. And there's a lot of other examples there too that she continues to talk about. And she said that a study in 2017 in the journal Nature Communications found that among hunter-gatherer societies, those with better storytellers are more cooperative, which is that's just great.
Yeah.
And I mean, things are kind of getting crappy now, but I wonder if that's why the US did good at first, because Hollywood was so strong. The human storytellers.
I have no idea.
I don't know. But I just think that's
then there's that quote from Kurt Vonnegut there in the middle of the page of 140, We are what we pretend to be, so we must be very careful
with what we pretend to be.
be.
Yeah. Don't tell kids that one though. But also here's some positive things, like Simon Lake, who helped pioneer the modern submarine, admits that he was influenced by the idea of the undersea exploration after reading Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And there's many examples of inventors who were inspired by science fiction. So it shows that it is a really powerful tool that we should use. Instead of just being convinced that humans should find another place in space to continue thriving, which is what Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk say.
Mm-hmm.
Which is ironic because they're fucking millionaires, and so they could help.
Well,
and so they're sending shit into space.
No, I think Jeff Bezos has done some stuff recently. Help. Okay, moving
on. Okay. So, and then they got responses like, fun facts, space wants you dead. Mars wants you dead. Titan wants you dead. Space will fucking kill you. Was a tweet by one science writer, and another one says, Earth is easy mode. Like, if you can't maintain habitability here, we're utterly fucked to try to pull off a long-term survival anywhere else. I'm on that boat, honestly.
Yeah.
Right now, the stories that many of us are telling about ourselves are hurting us. And so we need to tell better stories.
That is
better stories. And then she starts talking about Wakanda.
Yay.
So Wakanda is the most technologically advanced country in the world in the story, but the filmmakers chose the ground of our understanding of the civilization in sweeping images of the mist-veiled mountains, its verdant valleys, where sheep herders drive their flocks in ways we have done for generations, and its bordered tribemen wrapped in Wakandan version of Les Thanos blankets, galloped by on horseback. The message seems to be that Wakanda is a country whose greatest technological achievements is maintaining its environment. And she says one way that they do that is that there's no suburbs, because suburbs, studies have shown that suburb dwellers have greater greenhouse gas emissions than urban counterparts, and they require more like roads, which require concrete, which is a big form of greenhouse gas emissions, and they can also be more socially isolating. One study in Sweden found that if you live Curtis says suburbs suck. Yeah. I mean, I guess I live in a suburb, so I really can't talk.
You live in a little tiny town village.
I live in a town village in an apartment. So I don't know.
Okay, but let's talk about if I don't like cities myself because there's too much concrete.
Yeah, Mom's always been kind of against this idea that everybody should just move to cities.
I would feel like a rat in a rat's maze in a city. There's too many people, they're too close together, there's too much concrete. But if you gave me a vision like Wakanda,
exactly,
that would be different, because that's where there's green space.
Yes.
And the cities are beautiful, and what does it say? Buildings have plants growing off terraces and rooftops. The structures, the skyscrapers are high organic structures that rise out of surrounding forests that are lush, like they've never been chopped down. On the ground, a trolley toddles through the city, kicking up some dust because the ground is not asphalt, but rather pressed earth. It moves fast enough to beat walking, but slowly enough that people instinctively move out of its way, mingling through a narrow streetscape that contains no sidewalk. Because Wakanda doesn't have cars.
Yeah.
And that sounds appealing to me. I might leave my suburb for that.
Yeah, exactly. We need to redesign how we imagine cities. And there are some organizations that are doing that. Yeah, as Curtis says, many cities need redesigning. And I would love to live in a green city like that. Like, that would be really cool.
I need nature. I need nature desperately.
And as they say here, green spaces also provide a host of psychosocial benefits
Yeah.
from improving mood and behavior to speeding up healing and increasing students' abilities to learn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Reduce the likelihood of minor flooding because unlike cement and concrete hardscaping, soil absorbs water.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally cooler, lowers energy use. A lot of good things about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
how are we going to design cities that are green that I would want to move to?
Well, it needs to be smarter design. So, buildings that naturally heat and cool themselves without as much excess like AC and heating and stuff. I think that
Could you take
more balcony spaces need to be utilized.
Could you take downtown Detroit, for example, and make it into a green space that is beautiful that people would want to move to?
I think so, but it would require a lot of digging up of the current asphalt. We need to dig up a lot of the asphalt, and we need to double paint all the windows and put like green roofs up and have people.
Yeah.
I would say my only thing is that if we're just I mean, there's some types of concrete where I think like plants can kind of grow on it. Like we basically need a giant chia pet. Do you guys know what chia pets are? Like the giant. We need a giant chia pet city. That's what we need. Curtis says, "Whoop! Roads are for bikes and buses only now." I would love that.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
It would be better for our health, anyways,
and our divorce rate.
Right? Because if people live 40 minutes away or more, then they are more likely to be divorced.
40% more likely to divorce if they have a commute of 45 minutes or longer.
Jeez. See, Curtis knows chia, so everybody knows the chia pets. Yeah. Okay, and then finally, what she says is climate change can be an opportunity, one for humans to repair our relationship with the earth and re-envision our societies in ways that are not just in keeping with our ecosystems, but also make our lives better. And that is also a very key theme that we are seeing throughout the overall, book, is that we need to see it as an opportunity, not as just like taking down stuff, but it's bringing us up to a new level of humanity. So that's exciting to see, and I will leave you dreaming with that. So the next chapter is called Reshape, and I'll take Mom's book then. This is what the next picture looks like, and it says, "Enough of disruption and extraction. How beautiful the quiet work of maintenance, to repair the worn down, to mend the torn." You're welcome for reading to you guys. My voice is dead, but I'm happy to do it. And it's a fun book, and it forces me to keep a schedule of reading, which I would not be able to do otherwise. I'm using you guys to read more honestly. But it's great because, have a community to do that. And I just want to read to you guys the last thing, which is just a little description of the next chapter, because they had descriptions of each. So it's called Reshape. Problems embedded in the contours of cities, transport infrastructures, capitalism, coastlines, and landscape, where human nature meet. Much to reconsider, rend, invert, remake. And that's perfect because that's literally what we were just talking about. So now we're going to get more ideas. We're like,
yay.
This is a really well-designed book, I will say. All right. Remember to talk about the climate every single day and to support your local news organizations. On Tuesday, I'm going to talk about nuclear energy to keep on the sustainable energy theme. So stay tuned for that. And then also stay tuned for my tattoo tour, which will be coming soon as it's not too cold for honest to goodness. There's been several days where I've been like, oh, okay, I'm going to do it. And I'm like, it's really cold. I don't want to do it. And I live in California. I'm just a wimp. Anyways, I appreciate all of you that were here. Thank you so much. And I will see you later. Bye. And I don't know why I keep doing this because clearly it takes a while.